You already know this feeling. The alarm goes off, you open your eyes, and before your brain is even fully awake, it's already calculating. How bad do I actually feel right now? Could I pull this off? What's the worst that happens if I just don't go in today? And then you do it. You pick up your phone, you type the message, something vague, something just specific enough to be believable, but not so dramatic that anyone asks follow-up questions. Not feeling well. Going to rest today. You put the phone down. You pull the blanket back up, and for about 4 seconds it feels amazing. Then the guilt kicks in. But here's what nobody ever asks. Where did that instinct come from? Not the guilt, not the excuse, the calculation. That quick little moment where your brain runs the numbers and asks, could I get away with this? Because that moment didn't start with you. It didn't start with your parents or their parents or even the first civilization that invented the concept of a workday. That calculation is ancient, far older than cities, older than governments, older than schools, offices, and alarm clocks. And somewhere, beneath an open sky tens of thousands of years ago, someone ran those same numbers, and they had to do it without a phone, without a screen to hide behind, without a single excuse that hadn't already been heard 100 times by the same 30 people who had known them their entire life. So the question isn't simply, did ancient humans fake sickness to avoid work? The question is, how on earth did they pull it off? First, let's talk about what work actually meant back then, because most people picture it wrong. They imagine ancient life as non-stop survival. Every waking moment spent desperately searching for food before something bigger ate you first. The reality was more surprising. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers like the Hadza of Tanzania and the Juansi of southern Africa suggest that people often had time for storytelling, socializing, tool-making, music, and rest alongside the work required to survive. Ancient humans worked hard, but they weren't sprinting from crisis to crisis every hour of every day. Still, some jobs were miserable. And that's where our story begins. Imagine it's early morning. The fire has nearly burned out. People are beginning to wake up. Someone announces today's task. The water source is running low. A group needs to walk for hours under the sun, carry heavy containers back to camp, and do it again tomorrow. You hear the plan. You know exactly how your shoulders are going to feel by sunset. You know your feet will ache. You know it's going to be a long day. And for a brief moment, lying beneath your blanket, a thought appears. Not today. The problem? There was nowhere to hide. Think about your current situation. When you fake sick today, you often disappear behind a text message, an email, or a phone call. The people you're talking to may never see your face. They can't watch your behavior all day. They don't know whether you're actually resting or happily spending the afternoon doing something else. Ancient humans had none of that. They lived in bands of perhaps 20 to 40 people, the same people, every day, for years. These weren't coworkers. These weren't distant neighbors. These were people who knew your habits, your moods, your strengths, and your weaknesses. They knew what you looked like when you were genuinely exhausted. They knew what you looked like when you weren't. Every person in camp was an accidental expert on you. So if you were going to fake being sick, you had a much tougher audience than most people do today. And that's where things get psychologically fascinating. Because ancient humans weren't just watching for illness, they were watching for cheating. Anthropologists call this the free rider problem. In any group that shares resources and labor, there will always be a temptation for some individuals to take more than they contribute, to enjoy the food without joining the hunt, to rest while others gather, to benefit from the group's efforts while quietly doing less work themselves. Now imagine you're the person carrying water. It's your fifth trip of the day. The sun is beating down, your shoulders hurt. And back at camp, the same person who was too sick to help is sitting comfortably by the fire. They're still eating, still talking, still enjoying the benefits of everyone else's work, just not contributing. How long before people start noticing? How long before people start talking? That's the problem evolution had to solve. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived in small groups where survival depended on cooperation. A chronic free rider wasn't just annoying, they were dangerous. So humans became remarkably sensitive to unfairness. We remember cheaters, we watch for patterns. We pay attention to who contributes and who doesn't. If you claim to be sick, people notice things. Did you still have a healthy appetite? Did your energy suddenly return once the unpleasant work was finished? Did your symptoms always seem to appear when difficult jobs came around? People notice patterns, and patterns matter. But here's the twist. The same humans who were good at spotting cheaters were also remarkably good at caring for people who genuinely needed help. And that's exactly what made faking sickness possible in the first place. If every illness was treated with suspicion, truly sick people would suffer. So ancient humans faced the same dilemma we face today. Trust too easily, and some people take advantage. Trust nobody, and you abandon the people who genuinely need support. Archaeological evidence suggests that our ancestors often chose compassion. One debated example is Shanidar I, a Neanderthal, a close but distinct relative of modern humans, who survived despite severe injuries. Some researchers argue his group must have cared for him. Others contend his survival doesn't require that explanation. The picture is contested, but multiple archaeological sites do suggest that early hominins sometimes supported injured or elderly individuals, and that uncertainty created an opportunity. We can't know for certain what the strategy looked like, but if we reason from what we know about human psychology, It probably looked something like this. Probably not some dramatic performance. Dramatic illnesses attract attention. Attention leads to question. A smarter approach would involve something difficult to verify. A headache, fatigue, a sore stomach, a vague pain. Symptoms that leave no obvious evidence. Symptoms that are hard to prove and hard to disprove. In other words, the same kinds of excuses people still use today. The goal wasn't to convince everyone you were dying. The goal was simply to create enough doubt that nobody could be completely sure you were healthy. And if the group valued compassion, as humans often do, that doubt might be enough. So did ancient humans fake sickness to avoid work? We don't know. No diary survives from tens of thousands of years ago. No one scratched a confession onto a cave wall. Behavior like this rarely leaves evidence behind. But we do know something about human nature. Across cultures, centuries, and continents, people have always looked for ways to avoid unpleasant tasks. People negotiate, people make excuses, people calculate costs and benefits, and occasionally people decide they'd rather not carry the water, which brings us back to that moment, the one just after the alarm goes off, the one where your brain quietly asks, could I get away with it? Maybe that question has been traveling with our species for thousands of years, passed from one generation to the next without a single word being spoken. And somewhere in the distant past, a hunter-gatherer lying beside a dying campfire asked himself the very same thing. Not because he was lazy, not because he was evil, but because he was human, and for at least one morning, that was reason enough to stay under the blanket.